Try as you might, sometimes there are problems that simply cannot be fixed. But things are rarely as one-dimensional as we think. Very often it comes down to perspective. Obviously we can talk about how it's impossible to satisfy the entirety of our player base because we have different ideas for what makes a good meta or what makes for good content updates. I personally wish they would slow down with the hero releases and instead try to make new game modes, rather than introducing more characters that only add to the visual and audio clutter in the game. But other people wish that Blizzard added more heroes more quickly, because to them, hero releases as a form of content are always exciting since they keep the game fresh. However, this is a bit of a cop-out way of handling the topic I want to talk about today, because really, it does not add any perspective that, quite frankly, many of us are lacking. Role queue has been introduced to the game as a first step towards clearly defining what Overwatch is. Blizzard wants to make sure that whenever you log into the game, you know what kind of experience you are signing up for. They want to add reliability and structure to a previously unmoderated environment. Today's video is kind of a two-part story. In the first part, I want to talk about a game-breaking competitive exploit that has made its way into the game with the introduction of the role queue beta. It is something I stumbled upon by accident actually, but then decided to test more thoroughly with the help of my friends. Now, naturally, I am not going to explain to you in detail what that exploit is, because I don't know if Blizzard is going to fix it by the time Season 18 comes around, and I don't want you guys going around abusing it. However, I want to talk about how difficult it was for me to get Blizzard to recognize this as a problem in the first place. There is a bit of a story behind it that I believe you guys might find interesting. And in the second part of this video, I want to talk about the notion that many players feel like every new meta is exponentially worse than the previous one. I mean, who decides that? Who's to say that a meta is good or bad? Is there any way to quantify that? If both of these things sound interesting to you, then I'm sure you'll get a kick out of today's video. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Exploits in Overwatch have proven to be more than a mild annoyance. Anything that allows players to gain an unfair advantage over others in a ranked game mode contributes to the degradation of the competitive integrity of this environment. That means that if there's a surefire way of boosting yourself into top 500 without actually being good at the game, then it takes away from the value that this rating holds. And even just assigning any such value is already a very touchy subject in our community. Even if the Masters rank is considered top 3% or whatever, a lot of players universally agree that this is not a good rank. And even for me who plays in that exact rank, I am inclined to agree. I don't consider myself a particularly amazing player, and still, this is what the game rates my performance to be. According to the developers, competitive play was never meant to be a ladder. It's not meant to be climbed. As much as we feel accomplished on ranking up, the whole point of ranked play in Overwatch is literally just to feed the system enough information on your gameplay performance for it to put you in matches with other players of similar skill. If your skill degrades because you don't play enough, you D-rank. And if you get better over time and you best your peers, you will rank up. Gaining SR is not supposed to be a reward, and losing SR is not meant to be a punishment. It's simply a skill rating adjustment that attempts to keep matches as fair as possible. As much as we can argue about the accuracy of that system in place, fact of the matter is that it has been messed with time and time again. Sure, the FFA exploit that allowed Mei to glitch herself outside the map may be considered a minor nuisance, but if somebody found an exploit in competitive play that gave you a similar edge, the outrage would be much bigger. With that out of the way, I think most of us will be able to agree that any such exploit should be handled as quickly as possible, because the longer those are out there to be abused, the more the ladder is going to suffer in the long term. Matches will be even more unfair than they already feel, and players are going to quit in frustration. To a certain degree, some would even argue that easy to play meta heroes can damage the ladder in a similar way. Anyway, my point here is that this exploit that my friends and I found has been completely ignored. Bug fix reports have been left unanswered, and the customer support was equally unhelpful. The only reason that whatever I found came to the attention of Blizzard is because of EVA. You know, a content creator who, unlike me, is actually relevant and well known. EVA went on record to say that it has been a whopping 6 months since she reported a major exploit that is yet to be addressed. I figured this would be the perfect post to reply to and vent my own frustration about how our messages have been left unanswered as well. While I don't know about the exploit she's referring to, I know that the one we found is not even that far-fetched. And once found out, it could spread like wildfire because of how easily it can be replicated. As such, I was reasonably frustrated about the lack of response. Well, lo and behold, William Warnicke, Wernicke, lead software engineer at Blizzard Entertainment, replied to that tweet, and I too managed to get a blanket response. It was almost like I was secondhand relevant for just once in my life. He gave us an email to send the information to and assured us that these exploits would be looked into. And while I very much appreciate how actively William has been reaching out to try and resolve what he has to assume are game-breaking exploits, it is frustrating that the only way I managed to get Blizzard to recognize that this is a problem was by means of a well-known content creator. I managed to piggyback off of EVA's Twitter post, but what if somebody else doesn't? What if they are not so lucky, their bug report is ignored and customer support does not know what to do with the information? At this point, you might just be an honest-to-God community member trying to make sure the game does not break any more than it already is. Anyway, I figured this might make for an interesting storytime video for at least some of you guys, but YouTube really hates when I upload short videos more than they already hate me anyway, so I decided to put it in here. But now we finally get to move on to our second topic of the day. A few days ago, after having watched a bunch of my favorite streamers for hours on end soaking in different opinions, I tweeted out the following. The fact that every meta is followed by an even worse meta should say something about the state of the characters in Overwatch. It goes beyond just balance, but also design. If half your roster is annoying to play against, that's a problem. In response to that, I love garlic bread, me too buddy, me too, replied with the following. It's all subjective. My problem with some people and Overwatch content creators is that they're saying the meta keeps getting worse, but who decides that? Well, he's definitely right to a certain extent. Whether or not you like any particular meta comes down to a variety of factors. How much is your hero pool affected by the meta? How relevant is meta play in your elo? How frequently do you play ranked and as such end up being exposed to meta play? And the list goes on and on. Without trying to give you a cop-out answer on how everybody likes different metas to different degrees, by the way, feel free to check out my video on the history of meta comps in Overwatch that talks about every single competitive meta before Season 18. My point is that there will never be the perfect meta that satisfies everybody. However, based off of general gameplay designs that we know are popular and certain game mechanics we know are not, we can make somewhat of an assessment on why the most recent meta trends are considered unfun. The most notable example that comes to mind when talking about that is obviously crowd control. Anything that takes away control of your character falls under the blanket term CC, and it is widely regarded as one of the most unfun mechanics in gaming. Because hey, who likes having control of their character taken away, right? And as you know, Overwatch has no shortage of CC abilities. Anything from booping to freezing counts as a crowd control effect, and it is not entirely uncommon to go for extended periods of time without having full control of your own movement. One example Nateson brought up a little while ago was how Genji embodies the fun of non-oppressive mobility, and how Doomfist is the exact opposite of that. Everything movement related that Genji does not limit the opponent's ability to react, but every single ability Doomfist has is at the same time mobility, damage, and crowd control. As such, it is literally a character built around the idea of CC, and to make him fun, by design, you are taking the fun away from other players. But obviously, it does not take a college education, which I don't have, to explain why crowd control is generally unfun. The opposite side of that coin that I don't really see many people talk about, however, is that CC abilities allow you to put really fun things in your game that otherwise would be completely overpowered. You see, if you want to deliver on the power fantasy of an ultimate ability and actually have a player feel powerful when using it, then you have to generally make that ability very strong. But when left unchecked, those types of abilities end up dominating a part of the game where it's literally a case of players taking turns wiping each other via the use of ultimates. Kinda like the Graph Dragon meta in Season 10 where really there was no good counterplay to it. By adding crowd control to your game, you can add such abilities and make sure they are not always 100% victory tickets that secure a team fight. You make sure that they are resources that have to be used wisely and in consideration of whether or not the opposition has already used crucial cooldowns. It adds a certain level of depth to the gameplay where it is not just about arcadey run and gun, but instead, it's a game that is as much about managing your resources as it is about the mechanical execution of your character's kit. But as with anything in life, too much of a good thing will be bad for you. While there's nothing inherently wrong with the idea of ultimates and crowd control abilities, if you start adding too many and if there's no good counterplay to it, they definitely become very frustrating. And really, that is my main point of contention as to why I believe Blizzard should stop adding new heroes as quickly as they are, considering they made it their main type of content. Because there are only so many mechanics you can add to the game before you start repeating yourself. Orisa utilizes a mini graviton surge from from Zarya while deploying a shield akin to Reinhardt. And Sigma does the same thing as Orisa does with her shield, except he can also negate damage like D.Va. And all these things, respectively, are already very strong. Giving Orisa something on cooldown that would otherwise be an ultimate ability is a very risky move. And a deployable shield alone is already very powerful, but also giving Sigma damage absorb adds to the overall survivability of their entire team when stacking with other heroes that bring the exact same thing to the table. That's to say, heroes have been getting progressively more powerful over time. Abilities got faster, damage has been increased, and defensive capabilities have been following suit. We are simultaneously experiencing damage creep, mobility creep, healing creep, and I guess sustain creep? Defensiveness creep? You get the point. There's too much of everything. We have a bunch of characters that one-shot you out of the blue if you don't pay attention for even a second. We have characters that stack barriers on top of each other to try and stop that. We have characters that fly around you and poke you from all sides. We have disgusting amounts of healing and ridiculous quantities of damage from a variety of roles. This is no longer a matter of balance. This is a matter of character design. Some heroes in Overwatch simply no longer work unless they are overpowered. And some heroes are best left in a niche position where yes, they should be useless in a majority of circumstances, because they are simply not fun to play against. I apologize for not being able to find the exact comment anymore, but somebody said that the reason Orisa and Sigma are so much better than Reinhardt and Winston right now is because the last two have to commit to using their shields, whereas the first two can deploy and redeploy them without a care in the world. They can do all sorts of things while also having very powerful barriers. That's why they are better. And while I am not a balance expert, that comment makes a lot of sense to me. Why play a hero that has to commit to either protecting or doing damage when you can have one that can do both? In an attempt to deliver more heroes as a form of content, Blizzard started expanding hero kits to the point where mechanics are repeated and repeated again. Where previously every hero had one thing that made them super powerful and unique, the new heroes become amalgamations of all of these things. So really, no matter how much Blizzard is trying to balance the game, I don't believe that this is something they can fix, because quite frankly, they dug themselves in too deep. It would require a major overhaul of loads of characters kits to the point where they might as well be completely new heroes. And also, it would require Blizzard to admit that their vision of every hero being viable cannot and should not happen. That, in an attempt to preserve the unique nature of every character, some of them have to be only situationally viable. But I mean, that is just my opinion. People way smarter than me might figure out a better way to handle this entire situation, so don't take what I say as gospel. To get back to the question of who decides what makes it good and what makes it bad meta anyway, sure, we can point out general trends in game design to determine what is going to work best for most people, like not overcrowding any one type of ability, making sure there's always counterplay, adding crowd control sparingly, and making sure ultimates don't feel ridiculously unfair. But at the end of the day, it really is up to everyone's individual interpretation. And as such, I invite you guys to join the discussion down in the comment section below. What was your favorite meta in Overwatch, and what do you think Blizzard should do in response to the shield meta we are facing right now? I'll be looking forward to hearing your guys' opinion. But until then, thank you everybody so much for watching. Don't forget to drop me a like on your way if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you want to see more, and I hope to see you guys next time.